Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our final, we're not going to say webinar. What we're having today is a little bit more than your regular webinar. We are calling it our masterclass. And it is our final such for the year 2022. And it just so happens, not necessarily by any design per se, but from September until now, all our webinars have been focused around, dealing um, with the resilience and climate resilience in particular, coming from our Leading in Crisis webinar in September. Our last webinar, we looked at innovative financing options and the role of the public sector in leveraging those. And today, we're quite happy to be partnering with CRIF for them to introduce to you a new tool, their web-based monitoring application, WeMAP. But before we get into that, just want to remind you of those ground rules that we have in relation to having the best possible virtual learning experience. We want to remove our distractions and close our various applications on our device apart from Zoom, and to mute your phones. And you know that internet connectivity can sometimes be a challenge. So if you have internet cable, you want to plug that in. And we are going to give opportunity for persons to ask questions and have discussions towards the end of our session. And if you wish to use your voice to pose those questions or comments, then you want to ensure you have a headset that's working properly and your microphone. All right. So very quickly, I'm going to invite you just to share with us in the chat, where are you joining us from today? So I am Dr. Lloyd Parks. I am the Leadership Development and Institutional Strengthening Specialist with the Caribbean Center for Development Administration based in Barbados. But I'm joining you today from Jamaica, where I work remotely. And invite you to just place in the chat very quickly where you're joining from. I do recognize a few of the names in the chat. I see a couple of our alumni and partners. David, I want to give a special shout out to David. David, I had the opportunity and privilege to work with David. He was the environmental specialist advisor when we had the Caribbean Leadership Project. So welcome, David. Welcome. And I'm seeing quite a few things in the chat. So folks are joining us from Guyana, from Bermuda, yes, St. Lucia, Jamaica. Great, Turks and Caicos, yes. So good morning to you all. I see Oscar from TNT, yes. Shamal from Cayman. All right, welcome to you all. So we want to get right into the meat of the matter. And so today's topic, as you heard, we want to invite our partners, CRIF. If you don't know about CRIF, and I suspect most of us do, but just to ensure that we're all on the same page, and CARICAD is pleased to partner with them for a couple of years now. And they are really called CRIF SPC. And they offer a number of products through a number of segregated portfolios, which allows for the total segregation of risk. And they're really partnering with not only the Caribbean, but Central America to really help to provide support in the area of risk management, risk modeling, captive management, reinsurance brokerage, and among a number of services. And from CRIF SPC today, we have Gina Sanguinetti Phillips, who I will hand over to momentarily. And so, Gina, I'll allow you to start sharing your screen. Also from CRIF SPC is Elizabeth Emmanuel. They're also joined by Dr. Gabriele Cochia. And I will allow Gina to introduce Gabrielle to us here. So, Gina, over to you.
Good, thanks, Lois. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see so many persons from throughout the Caribbean. My name is Gina Sanguinetti Phillips, and I am part of the team with CRIF that works on the technical assistance and the corporate communications portfolios. My colleague Elizabeth Emanuel is here also. Liz, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, she is actually the head of the corporate communications and technical assistance teams. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Gabriella Coccia, who is part of our risk management specialist team. Gabriella, would you like to say a couple words?
Thank you, Gina. So good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriele Coccia. I'm part of the risk management specialist team of CRIF, and my main role is related to the development and monitoring of all the CAT risk models that are behind that support the policy that are offered by CRIF. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. So I'm going to start off this morning providing you a short overview of CRIF and of the WeMAp, which is CRIF's web monitoring application, before Dr. Coccia goes into the session on WeMAp, showing you how it can be used. And we encourage you to use this tool. If you would like to receive access, you can simply send us an email and we'll be happy to do so. So we'll talk a little bit about CRIF. Lois gave you a brief overview in her introduction and a few words on CRIF's models and policies, because the WeMAp system actually kind of demonstrates how the models and the policies work. So it, in addition to being a real-time hazard management tool, it also gives you insight into CRIF's models and policies. And a number of you, maybe all of you, are from countries which do have CRIF policies currently. So then we'll give you a brief introduction to the tool and how it can be used, and then Gabriella will go into the actual WeMAp demonstration. So Lois, and maybe you can provide guidance. Will we take questions throughout the presentation, or do you want to have us pause for questions, or how would you like to manage that?
It's really up to you, but what I will say, participants, you can, we'll take the bulk of the questions, of course, at the end of the presentation, but if there's something very pressing, that you can just indicate in the chat. So you want to pose any questions you have in the chat. Okay, I will monitor the chat and those questions.
Okay. All right, thanks, Lois. Okay, so what is CRIF SPC? I am sure all of you, or most of you, have heard of CRIF SPC, formerly known as the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. CRIF SPC is the Caribbean's parametric insurance program, basically. So we were formed in 2007, a few years after Hurricane Ivan had caused so much damage in the Caribbean, and Caribbean governments approached the World Bank for some kind, or to develop some kind of mechanism that could help governments in the region deal with hazard events such as that. So CRIF is the world's first multi-country, multi-peril risk pool based on parametric insurance. And it provides parametric catastrophe insurance for both the Caribbean and Central American governments. So it's a not-for-profit organization, and it provides its products and services to 19 Caribbean governments, 3 Central American governments, and 2 electric utility companies in the Caribbean. And we'll say a few minutes about that in a second. So CRIF represents basically a cost-effective way. We provide policies to these governments at the lowest possible price. And so we provide a way that governments can invest in a mechanism to provide short-term liquidity to begin recovery efforts right after a catastrophic event occurs. And so we fill the gap between the immediate assistance provided right after catastrophe and long-term redevelopment, which is usually facilitated by international development partners. So basically, as I mentioned, CRIF is a development insurance company, and that means that we provide goods and services. We are concerned with the overall development prospects of our members. So we're more than just a simple insurance company selling policies. We have programs in place in addition to our insurance to help countries achieve their development goals and their development prospects. And we offer products that are typically not readily available in traditional insurance markets. So CRIF's key feature is that it provides parametric insurance, which is one key component of a country's disaster risk financing strategy. We do encourage and stress to governments that it is only one component and that they need to have other disaster risk financing tools in place. As I mentioned, we have 24 members, and this is just a list. Lucilec, which is the electric utility company in St. Lucia, is the most recent member, and they joined this year. So what makes CRIF unique? Basically, CRIF's parametric products are insurance contracts that make payments based not on assessment of damages after an event, but based on the intensity of an event and the amount of loss calculated in a customized pre-agreed model, and determines the amount of loss caused by those events. So therefore, because we calculate the losses right after an event, parametric insurance policies enable these payouts to be made very quickly after a hazard event. And in CRIF's case, within 14 days of an event. And in some cases, countries have even received payouts within 7 days, or partial payouts within 7 days of the event. So we do not have to wait for loss adjusters to go into the field on the ground to determine what the loss is. And as many of you know, that process can sometimes months and even years. So CRIF can make payouts up to $150 million per peril for each country that purchases a policy. So in a nutshell, this is CRIF. So we've been around since 2007. We have 24 members, and since 2007, we've made 58 payouts totaling $260 million US. And we basically have 5 main products. And you'll see some of these kind of demonstrated through WeMAp today. Tropical cyclone policies, which are based on wind and storm surge, earthquake policies, excess rainfall, fisheries policies, which are sold to the government for the fisheries industry, and electric utilities, which protects transmission and distribution lines, and that's sold directly to the electric utilities companies. So since 2007, CRIF did an estimate, and based approximately 3.5 million persons in the Caribbean and Central America have benefited from payouts. And as you can see from the graph, the countries have used the payouts for a range of purposes. And we're also looking at developing new products, for example, for agriculture, tourism, housing, water and wastewater utilities, and so on. So just a quick word on the CRIF model. Basically, CRIF's parametric policies are based on the loss modeling approach. So this allows CRIF to estimate the loss probabilities for individual countries price their contracts based on their own risk profiles, and then determine or calculate the model losses for a particular country after a particular hazard event occurs. And so as the diagram indicates, the modeled losses are based on the intensity of the particular hazard, the exposure in that country, meaning the assets on the ground that are at risk, and the vulnerability of that particular country. So these are all country specific. And then the model calculates the model loss and compares it to the country's insurance policy to determine if their policy was triggered, and if so, what the value of the payout is. So it's a very simple model. So clearly the CRIF does all it can to ensure that this model and the calculation of the model loss and the values of the hazard and exposure and vulnerability are as accurate as possible. So in summary, there are three basic models: the tropical cyclone model, which is called the SPHERA, or System for Probabilistic Hazard Evaluation Risk Assessment model. And that's based, as I mentioned, on wind and storm surge. The earthquake model and the excess rainfall model. And these are the models that underpin WeMAp also. So that's why we are able to link the WeMAp tool with the country's actual risk profiles and policies. So when Gabriella starts his session, you'll actually be able to see these models working in real time, or historically. You can look at past events also. So just to recap, so a country's parametric insurance policy is triggered if the event loss is above a certain trigger level. And the insurance disperses funds based on estimates of the model loss based on certain hazard event characteristics, as I mentioned earlier. And they're applied to the government exposure on the ground to produce that loss estimate. And as the value of the model loss increases above the trigger, the payout amount of that policy increases up to the policy's coverage limit. And just a brief graphic of the policy, and I put this up and you'll see why, because for certain users of WeMAp, they're able to see if their country's policy is likely to be triggered or not. So basically, if you look at the bottom of the diagram, when the losses are calculated, it is compared to the policy's trigger or attachment point to determine if the policy is triggered. And this is what special access users can determine through WeMAp. So in a nutshell, WeMAp is, as I mentioned, CRIF's web monitoring application. And it's specifically for earthquakes, tropical cyclones, rainfall events, and it has a fourth component called the real-time forecasting system, which allows users to determine what upcoming tropical cyclones, what the impacts and the range of impacts and the actual impacts are likely to be. So it's the first three tools for tropical cyclone, rainfall, and earthquake are looking at actual data that is associated with those events. The real-time forecasting system can allow countries to look ahead and determine potential impacts of an upcoming storm. So basically, it allows users to access information about those three hazards, and also it is actually a visualization of the CRIF model. So it shows you the wind footprint, the storm surge, the level of ground shake, and the level of rainfall associated with a particular hazard event, and it shows you that graphically. And so a number of you will say, well, there are a number of tools, you know, that show you weather information and so on during and after an event. And of course, those are available. But what WeMAp does is it shows you the impacts of the CRIF models and shows you exposure and hazard information generated by CRIF's models. Excuse me. So this is the information that you will be able to see for the 3 tools and the real-time forecasting system. So as it says here that the 3 tools monitor actual data that has, you know, based on events that have occurred or are occurring, while the RTFS, the real-time forecasting system, shows the expected future development of active tropical cyclones. So it's a little different from the first 3 tools. And these are just some of the uses. I'm sure you'll be able to think of others, especially depending on where you yourself are coming from and where you work. And so WeMAP can be used to provide information for contingency planning and shelter management, emergency intervention, and so on. It's been used, for example, in Haiti, for example, after the earthquake back in 2010, and the hurricane season was coming right after. It allowed persons who were planning to address the earthquake, for example, where they should locate shelters, keeping in mind the upcoming hurricane season. So it can assist in a number of different emergency and disaster management and disaster preparation activities. CIMH, the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, is one of the primary users of the outputs of WeMAP, and it provides input into their own Caribbean Duetra platform and then allows it to prepare briefings for SEDEMA and organizations throughout the region on upcoming events. And also, national meteorology and disaster management offices can use the tool for the same purpose. And of course, other government agencies, international organizations, and so on. So after this session, if you do wish to obtain a WeMAP account, please just send an email with a request to pr@crif.org. Okay, so before we go into the actual sessions, I'd like to just pause briefly to ask if there are any questions. Well, anything that I've said about CRIF itself or WeMAP. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat.
No, there are no questions in the
Okay.
chat, so we can continue.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and invite Gabriella to take you through the WeMAP system.
Thank you, Gina. Good morning, everybody. So I will show now the WeMAP interface, the web platform that Gina just introduced. I've prepared a few study cases that we can look at to see what it's possible in practical terms, how to what can be done with the WeMAP platform. And I also am open at the end of the session, or I don't know if Lois agrees also during the section, since this will be an interactive section, I'm open to answer any question or to any curiosity that may come up. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, just 1 second. Okay. You should be able to see my screen now. This is the, please can you confirm that you're seeing my screen?
Yes, Gabriella.
Thank you, Gina. So this is the login page of WeMAP that is accessible through the URL that you see in on the bar on the top left, that is wemap.crif.org/index.html. Here you can access the system or recover your password or request the access to this link. You will download a form that you can send to the email address that Gina just mentioned. So I created a temporary user account for this session. And after the login, you are immediately redirected to the default page, which is the page that shows the latest data about precipitation that are available in the system. As Gina mentioned, the WeMAp is composed of 4 main sections. The first 3 sections are for monitoring the status of the policies and of the models that are that underpin the policies offered by CRIF. So the first one that are accessible, this section are accessible through the top left of the menu. The first one is the section on the excess rainfall model. The second one is on the tropical cyclone model that is called SFERA. And again, SFERA is also the model used for the earthquake section. We also have a 4th section that is a bit different because it's not for monitoring, but it's for forecasting. So this is a real-time forecasting system that is specifically focuses on tropical cyclone. So we will see that later, but it's a real-time forecasting system for tropical cyclone, for wind speed and storm surge. As I said before, you are looking now at the excess rainfall section. This is the default page. You see clearly the map behind the Google in the background, the Google map, and you can notice the domain that is covered by CRIF models and CRIF data that cover all the countries that are CRIF members and all the other countries that are not yet members but that belong to the Central America or the Caribbean regions. For this specific session, I activated 2 countries that we can use for as a case studies. One is Guadeloupe in the Caribbean, and the other is Panama and Central America. And the first thing that you can notice is that they are identified by a marker. In this case, both markers are green. The color has a meaning. In this case, green means that there is no rainfall activity at the moment, or at least not enough to identify a rainfall event that can or cannot, potentially can, may trigger the policy. So the green color means there's normal activity, there may be some precipitation, but not enough to identify a rainfall event that is covered by the policy. You can also see here the last date that we have available. So these are data for December 10th. We have a latency in data of 2 or 3 days. All time here is in UTC. So we have a latency of between 2 and 3 days. That depends on the latency of the input data that are used to feed the models. Used in the CRIF policies. So the latest date available for precipitation is December 12th, as I said. And what you're looking at is actually the daily precipitation for December 12th, that the accumulated precipitation for that day, estimated from the satellite. In the XSR model, we use currently, in the current version, that is the XSR 2.5 version, we use 3 different precipitation data sets. So it's an ensemble composed of the 3 members. One of the 3 members is comes from satellite, is the CMORPH data set developed by the by the NOAA, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Agency of the United States. And in addition to satellite data, we also use two different configurations of the weather model, WRF, WRF model, that also provide the not forecast, but estimate of precipitation in a near real time. You can move through these different models through the using the menu on the top right, especially in particular on the third icon, where you can select the map type that you want to show. So this is actually we can define this as the hazard section, so where we can see the hazard data. Gina before showed that the models are composed as any risk model. Are composed of three main models. One is the hazard, then the exposure, and then the vulnerability. All the hazard data that are used in the model are can be shown on WeMAp, and these are exactly the same data that are used in the model in the models for the computation of or triggering of potential payouts. So the CMORPH dataset, as I said before, is the one derived by from satellite with remote sensing. We are looking at the original data that have a resolution of 8 kilometers, aggregated at a daily temporal resolution. But we can also look at different aggregation periods. So, for example, to identify an event, a rainfall event in the XSR model, we identify the maximum precipitation over two different aggregation periods, one that is short aggregation and long aggregation period. Depending on the country, usually the short period is 12 hours, while the long period is 48 hours, this is in the Caribbean, while in Central America is 24 hours, the short period, and 72 hours, the long period. So if we select the short period, for example, we can see, well, there is not much activity on this day, but then we can select a date with more rainfall. We see that we can see, for example, over Trinidad, that the satellite identified estimated precipitation lower than with volumes lower than 10 millimeters over most of the country. The resolution here for this data set is 1 kilometer because we do a downscaling from the original data at 8 kilometers to this resolution of 1 kilometer. That is the same resolution that we use for the exposure data. We will see that even later. We can actually go to see a recent event that happened this year in Guadeloupe and explore a bit all the data and information that can be seen, but also downloaded from the enterprise, from WeMAp. So in September 2022, Hurricane Fiona crossed the Caribbean and unfortunately hit the island of Guadeloupe. We can select the dates through this icon in the menu, the time interval. We can select, for example, a single date, as we are looking at, or a date range. Fiona happened in mid-September, around, for example, September 15th. So I'm moving to that date. I will go again to the original satellite data at 8 kilometers, and actually we see the precipitation induced by Fiona on September 15. It was still in the ocean. If we move using the arrows that you see at the bottom of the web page, we can go to the next date and move through the date and see how the precipitation induced by Fiona was evolving and moving across the region. On September 17th, Fiona was actually over Guadalupe, and that actually we see from satellite that very high values of precipitation were estimated above the maximum, the scale of that we are seeing now, about 200 millimeters over the island, and then it continued crossing the region. We can have a look also at the process precipitation, for example, for the aggregated 12 hours. We saw that over the exposed cells of Guadalupe, all the country experienced values of precipitation greater than 200 millimeters in 12 hours. And the same also in 48 hours for the long aggregation period. In addition to that, we can also see other information like the SPI, the standardized precipitation index. That is another variable that is used in the model to take into account the saturation of the soil. So the standardized precipitation index tells us if the amount of precipitation fall in the last month was on average with the precipitation that usually fall in that season, in this season, or above average or below average. So high values means that the precipitation in the month before Fiona reached the island of Guadalupe was, if we look at day 15 and day 16, so before the precipitation reached the country, it was almost on average. It was around 0 or slightly below, slightly above, so it was a normal season for Guadalupe in September. This is another information that is shown in WeMAp because, as I said before, it's used in the model to take into account this factor. We can also have a look at the other two WRF configurations that are used in the model, which are currently the configuration that we call the number 5 and number 7. You also see number 1 and number 2, but these are all configurations that were used in previous version of the model before 2019. We can see the same information that I mentioned for CMOR, but also for these other two configuration of WRF. So, for example, this is the daily precipitation at 8 kilometers, and actually these are the output data from the WRF model, and the aggregated.
Gabriele, sorry
yes?
to interrupt before you go too far. And Lois, I just think maybe we should take this one question while Gabriele is there.
Sure.
There's a question from David. I note that the Guadalupe icon remains green, so it indicates only current status and not historical status?
Yes, that is correct. So the marker it just indicates the current status in real time. So according to the last simulation. However, we can look, and I will get there soon, the record of the events that were triggered in the past for the country in a different section, in a specific section of the country.
Thank you. And can you go back to the previous screen showing the different, yeah. So I don't think I'd mentioned this in the introduction, and just want to expound that the excess rainfall model uses 3 sources of data, as Gabriela said. 2 weather configurations, that's WRF, which we call WRF, 5 and 7. And also a satellite-based system called CMOR. And these are all, the 3 of them are obtained through NOAA, right, Gabriela? They're all through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we are working on, I think, the next update of the excess rainfall model will replace CMOR.
Yeah, so just to complement what you just said, Gina, thanks, is that CMOR come from NOAA, from the Climate Prediction Center of NOAA. WRF configuration, so we run WRF internally, but use data from GFS, the Global Forecasting System, and also in the configuration number 7, we assimilate observation again from observation repository of the node. And in the next update, we will actually expand the ensemble to 6 members. So in addition to the 3 that we just mentioned, CNORF and the WAR 5 and WAR 7, we will introduce EMERG, which is a recently developed remote sense precipitation dataset developed by the NASA, the GPM group of NASA, and 2 additional configuration of WRF at high resolution, so a resolution of 3.6 kilometers, while the current configuration WRF 5 and WRF 7 are at 8 kilometers.
Okay, there's another question. What does the red marker mean?
Okay, so I will explain. So at the moment, there are no ongoing event in any of the countries, so we cannot see that, but the marker can be, as I said, green. It can become red when there is a rainfall event ongoing. A rainfall event is defined as a situation where at least a certain percentage of the country is affected by rainfall above a certain threshold. So this percentage and this threshold are country specific and are calibrated according to the analysis of historical data. So when there is precipitation above certain threshold that affect at least a certain percentage of the exposed area of the country, a rainfall event is defined. It will start on a specific date, so the first date when these conditions are met, and it can last 1 or more day, depending on clearly on the precipitation event. And during these days, so the first that is open and the following day where days when these conditions are met, the marker becomes red. And on the first day where the conditions are not met anymore, the marker becomes orange, which means that we are observing a tolerance period. So we allow, depending on the country, 1 or 2 days when the conditions are not met before closing the event. So it may happen that during an event there is one day, just one day, with a lower amount of precipitation, but then precipitation starts again the day after. In that case, we want to consider this just one event. So we allow this tolerance period of 1 or 2 days, depending on the size of the country. Usually it's 1 day in the Caribbean and 2 days in Central America. And once also this tolerance period is observed and the conditions are not met again, the event is closed, definitely closed, and the marker may become or yellow or blue. If it becomes blue, it means that the event is definitely closed and we already have all the information needed to evaluate a potential triggering of the policy, of the payout. We can compute the losses and compare them with the policy condition and see if the event triggers or not a payout. If it becomes yellow, it means that we will need to wait a few days to see if there is a disaster alert issued by a third-party agency that is called ReliefWeb, which is a humanitarian agency that triggers disaster alert for different hazards. But we clearly focus only on those related to the weather for the excess rainfall in tropical cyclone model. In case ReliefWeb issues, we allow so a few days after the event is closed to see if a disaster alert is issued by ReliefWeb, because this information is used in the computation of the losses and in the evaluation of the potential triggering of the policy. Once also this period is passed and the marker will become again green, indicating normal condition. So there are these 5 different colors: green, red, orange, yellow, and blue, that gives an immediate view on the status of the policies as soon as you access the interface.
I just want to say one quick word to the participants. As you can see, the names on your screen, they're in Italian, but of course, when you access it, it'll be in Jamaican. I mean, in English.
Yeah, that clearly depends on your region. I'm in Italy now. Well, I'm almost all the time in Italy. I live here, so my default setting are in Italian, but it depends on the settings of your browser. You will see this. This is connected to Google Maps API, so that depends on the settings that you have in your browser. The other question, Gina?
No, go ahead, Gabriele.
Okay, thank you. So we were looking at the precipitation from the different data set and different aggregation period during the when Fiona crossed the region in September 2022. And we were looking at WAR 5, same information can be seen for WAR 7 and different temporal resolution, a daily or long or short aggregation period. So as you can see, the models give different estimates of precipitation. This is something expected and that is exactly the reason why we use an ensemble of 3, and we will expand it to 6 different members to estimate the precipitation, because we cannot rely on just one data set. We want to have information from different data sets that may catch better or worse, depending on the type of model, a different type of events. So when if you click on the marker, there is a balloon that appears that show the condition of the policy. In this case, we see that it's a normal condition. It shows the percentage of exposed cells that are considered active. So as I said before, the percentage of the grid cells where the precipitation is above the threshold, the specific threshold of the country. And if you click on the balloon, you access the specific page of the country, Guadeloupe. This section is not accessible to all the users. There are clearly different level of permission depending on the type of users. The other section is accessible to everyone that has access to WeMAp, while this section usually is reserved to members to Ministry of Finance or specific people that have specific role that can access also this is because in this section we are showing the parameters of the policy and the actual values of losses computed by the model during an event. Guadeloupe doesn't have a policy in place for XSR or tropical cyclone now, so the numbers that you look at are reasonable numbers, but they do not support any real policy at the moment. So in this section, you can see, first of all, the parameters that I mentioned before. So for example, to activate a precipitation event, we have 2 different aggregation periods, as I said, 12 and 48 hours. And the rainfall that must be exceeded in 12 hours is 23 millimeters, in 48 hours is 43 millimeters, over at least 50% of the exposed area of the country. And we allow 1 day of tolerance before closing one event. These are the parameters that I mentioned before, and as I said, they are specific for each country and are based on the analysis of historical data. You can also see the policy parameters, those that Gina mentioned before. So on the x-axis of this chart, you can see the model losses. So the losses that are computed by the model, combining the hazard data with the exposure data and the vulnerability. And the attachment point, which is the value that must be exceeded to trigger a payment, to trigger the policy. This case is about $71 million. And the exhaustion point, which is the losses value above which the payout does not increase, but it has already reached the maximum, which is called the coverage limit, and that is the maximum that the policy can pay. In between these two values, the payment triggered by the policy increase linearly with the losses. So through this chart, one can quickly see, based on a certain value of losses modeled by the XSR model, what payment would correspond according to the current policy condition. Clearly, this chart depends on the policy condition that have been selected and chosen by the country at the beginning of the policy year. In the lower part of this page, you can see, as I mentioned before, the records of the events that have been identified by the model. You can see if there are current CARES. CARE stands for Covered Area Rainfall Event, so means a rainfall event. If there are ongoing rainfall event, there are no ongoing rainfall event currently, as we actually had already seen from the green marker on the map. And there is also the list of the past event of the current policy year or even previous policy year. So there is the record, a record starting from the policy year 2018-2019. So since when WeMAp was in place. And I mentioned before the event, the rainfall. We looked at the rainfall map associated to Fiona, to Tropical Cyclone Fiona, which is represented by this event, is the event number 1 of the current policy year. The event opened on September 17 and closed on September 19. So in those days, we would have seen the red marker on the map. And we see in this chart the losses computed according to the 3 different models. So the losses computed according to CMOR, so based on the precipitation estimated by CMOR, the losses according to WAR 5 and the losses according to WAR 7. Depending on some conditions, some parameters, one is, for example, the exceedance of this loss threshold, which is another parameter that is used to activate the secondary trigger in the XSR model. We compute the final losses usually as the average of the models that provide loss estimate above this loss threshold. In this case, all the 3 models would have provided losses above the loss threshold. So the final loss, which is indicated as final RIL in the right chart. RIL stands for rainfall index losses, which means that it's not an actual value of losses, but is an index that represents the losses induced by the rainfall. It's computed as the average of all the 3 models, and you can see in this chart in which section of the policy chart that Gina also presented before, this value falls. If it is in the red part, in the green area, that means it's below the attachment point. It means that the policy is not triggered. So losses have been estimated by the model. The model identified an event, an extreme event, computed losses, but if it's below the attachment point, the losses were not enough to trigger the policy. If it is like in this case, in between the attachment point and the exhaustion point, it means that there is a payout, as you can actually see here, a payout actually is here, and the amount of the payout can be derived according to this chart, as I mentioned before. So comparing this value, 100 million in the x-axis, entering the x-axis with that value, and getting in the y-axis the amount of payout. Again, repeat, these values are let's say fake numbers, so there is not a real policy in place, so it's just for the purpose of this session. If this value falls on the red section of the chart, that means that the exhaustion point has been exceeded and the coverage limit, so the maximum payment that can be made during a policy year is triggered. So these are all information that are available in real time. These information are actually updated in real time, day by day. So in September, on the 17th, we would have seen that the CARE has opened, and we would have seen the preliminary loss estimates provided by the model according to the data that were available up to that date. And then all this information, all this data are updated day by day according to the evolution of the event. And it's also interesting to note that this tool, WeMAp, is the same that we at CCRIF uses to monitor the policies. So we are actually, the users can see and access the same data that CCRIF is using to monitoring the policy and to trigger payout. So there is it's important that it's a tool that helps, extremely helps the communication and the transparency between CCRIF and the member countries regarding the policy, status of the policies, the data that are used.
Gabriella, there is a
Yes.
question from Alison. If lives are lost in the event, will more be paid out to the country?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Can you please repeat?
If lives are lost, if there's loss of
Okay.
life, more be paid out to the country?
No, because the payout depends exclusively on the loss estimates, the loss estimated by the model. This is our parametric insurance product works. And the model only takes into account, so losses that are the losses modeled by the XSR are only direct losses to exposed asset like building, infrastructure, and so the index is the rainfall index losses is based on the estimated losses to buildings and infrastructure, many buildings, infrastructure. It does not depend on any parameter that is not included on the model. So this is very important in a parametric insurance. Actually, there is an agent that is called verification agent that is a hard copy of the model that after any event can run the model and verify that the results that are shown by CCRIF are those that are actually provided by the model. So everything is defined by the model. Which is the advantage of a parametric insurance, because it's what allows the CCRIF to make payment or to provide liquidity immediately after the event, because there is no need for loss assessment that may take months, but also is subject to basis risk. So it means that the model may in some situation overestimate the impact or underestimate the impact depending on the situation. And actually the challenge of model, this parametric model developer, is to reduce at the minimum this basis risk, and it is what CCRIF actually does, and that's the main objective of the update of the model that we mentioned several times today that will take place from next policy year.
Thank you.
Sure. So in this section, actually, the user has access to all the information and can see by himself or herself what the model is seeing in terms of precipitation and what is the status of the policy, if the policy is triggered or is not triggered.
And I just want to reiterate, though, as Gabriella mentioned, this is not accessible to most users. Only certain special persons with special access have can see the data related to the actual policy, because of course, as you would imagine, a country's policy, that is proprietary information. Thanks.
Yes. Thanks, Gina.
Okay, sorry, there's a question before you go along, Sean.
Sure.
From Sean, historically, what's the average variance seen between estimated losses and actual losses?
I do not have the number now, but what we do when we develop a model is to compare, to run the model for the entire historical period. So CMORF is available since 1998. IMERG since 2000. So depending on the model that we are using. So currently with CMORF, we run the model starting in 1998 on a daily basis, as it were in place since that time, and look at the events that are identified, compute the losses for each of those events, and compare this value with the reported losses that we can gather from several information. There is clearly a huge uncertainty on the reported losses because some come from reinsurers, some take into account not only direct losses, but also indirect losses or losses to the content of buildings, business interaction. So, and the losses may come, like in this situation, may come from wind, maybe caused by wind, and maybe caused by floods. So usually it's not easy to find the exact value of losses caused by flooding and those that are caused by wind. So there is some uncertainty on the reported losses. We cannot do a real comparison number with the exact number. What we compare is that clearly the number talk to each other, so they are reasonably similar. And also what we're really interested in is on the return period of the event identified by the model because of the impact of the event. Estimated by the model, because at the end is that value that define the amount of the payout. So we looked at the estimated losses. We make sure that they are reasonably similar to those that we have available when we have them available, because not for all events we can find the information on loss estimates. And we also check that the ranking of the order in terms of estimated losses is as much as similar to the ranking of the event in terms of the reported losses. Those are the main information that we look at, and when we validate the model and calibrate and validate the model, and this is what guarantee that the model is working properly and is robust and able to identify the extreme events that need to be identified. So when the policy must be triggered, because another thing that we need is always to take into account is that these models are designed for extreme events. So it's not designed to assess the impact of events that happen every year or even more than once per year, because this is not our purpose. Our purpose is to identify to estimate and identify the return period of extreme events, those events that may trigger the policy, and when actually having a parametric policy is useful.
Okay, thanks, Gabriele. And just to follow up on what I had said earlier about special access, CRIF generally provides this special access to see the policies only to persons from the Ministry of Finance, as those are the primary contacts for CRIF in the member countries. So just to point that out.
Okay, thank you, Gina. And so if we go back to the map of rainfall that we were looking at before, and we go again into the period that we mentioned about September 17th. I didn't mention before that in addition to well, we can, depending on the user permission, we can also see information on impact. We will see this in the next section, and it's not available for XSR, but it will be available for tropical cyclone. Also, we can also have, as I said, I show the hazard data. We can also see the exposure data. So the exposure represent the distribution in space of the value of the asset exposed at risk. Clearly, we cannot see here the actual value of the exposure because you have access to the entire region, but you can see the values categorized in 6 different categories from very low to very high. And another important thing is that all this data that we show, the hazard data, can be downloaded through this link that allows the user to download what is currently shown on the map. So at the moment we are looking at the CMORPH daily data at 8 kilometers for the 17th of September. If we go to download data, it allows us to download the same map in a TIFF format, so in GeoTIFF. It can be downloaded and open in any GIS software, so like QGIS or ArcGIS. So all the data can be not only visualized, but also downloaded and used for different purposes. And it's important again to highlight the fact that the data that are downloaded from WeMAp are exactly the same data that are used in the model. I don't know if there are some specific question on the XSR on this section. We saw almost all the main information that can be, well, the main interesting information, the main thing that we can see through WeMap. And I would move to the second section of tropical cyclone, unless there are some questions on the rainfall section that I can answer now.
Gabriele, maybe you could mention the disaster alerts.
Yeah, sure. So as I said before, another information that is used in the model and the XSR model is the disaster alert issued by ReliefWeb. And there is a section here on the top right of the menu on disaster alerts that lists all the disaster alerts that have been open since 2016 from ReliefWeb. For example, for Fiona, okay, for Hurricane Fiona, ReliefWeb opened the disaster alert, and you can click through the link to the page, specific page of Hurricane Fiona. You can see the overview. This text is taken from ReliefWeb, so it's the same that you can see on the ReliefWeb page. And this is the list of countries affected by the hurricane that is again provided by ReliefWeb. There is also a link to the original entry on ReliefWeb, where you can actually see the same description that I saw before and the same list of affected countries. So since this is important information for the model and for the potential trigger of a policy, it is also shown and accessible on the on WeMap. Well, the last icon that you see on this menu allow you to view your data of your account, or well, to edit them, especially to change the password, because when a user is created, a temporary password is provided to the user, and we always suggest the user to go here and change the password at the first access. Other question, or Gina, do you have some question?
There's one other question, but Lois, I think this is more for you, asking if the recording will be shared after.
Definitely, it will be shared with all of the registrants.
Thanks. Okay, Gabriella.
Thank you. So we can move to the next section, which is related to a tropical cyclone. All the information that we see in this section come from the model that is called SFERA, the SFERA model, that is the one used to support the tropical cyclone policy offered by CCRIF. As before, we saw all the data for the XSR 2.5 model, and now we will see the data used by the provided by the SFERA model. Again, we see the status of the countries regarding the tropical cyclone policy. So the color of the marker of one country can be different depending on the section you are. For example, if there is a tropical cyclone, but with it may be the marker red in the tropical cyclone section, but green on the excess rainfall. This usually doesn't happen because tropical cyclone usually open events for both tropical cyclone and excess rainfall, but it may happen because excess rainfall has a delay, has a latency of 2 or 3 days, as I said before, while tropical cyclone is almost real time. The SFERA model runs automatically and checks every few minutes, very frequently, the NOAA repository to see if there are new tracks, so tracks of new tropical cyclone, or updates to tracks of ongoing tropical cyclone. As soon as it finds a new track, it downloads and run the wind model, the storm surge model, and estimate the losses and upload all the data to WeMAp to update the web interface. So the latency that we have on the tropical cyclone section is just the latency due to the model calculation, which may be 1 or 2 hours depending on the size of the event. In the tropical cyclone section, there are more or less the same icons in the menu that we saw before. In addition, we have this icon, instead of having the time interval window, we have the list of events. For example, we can go and select the Hurricane Fiona, and we can see the information about Hurricane Fiona. So the track, which is this, okay, the bold line in the middle of the map is the track provided by NOAA. For each stretch of the track, we can see in the dashboard on the top left the information. So, for example, we can see that date time was September 16 at 12 p.m. UTC. So in that moment, the high of the hurricane was still on the ocean, approaching the Caribbean island. And we have information on the minimum sea level pressure, on the maximum wind speed, the maximum wind radius, and the maximum wind radius. So these are all the information that are taken from the NOAA. It was category tropical storm. All the information that are taken from the NOAA and are used in input to feed the SFERA model, which through this information and through the wind model that is included Sphera, generates the map that you see below, so the wind field map. This map represents the maximum wind speed induced by the tropical cyclone. And the layer shown can be again selected by using this menu, the menu layers. We can even display only the track to see it better. We can include the wind field. Clearly, this wind field is updated in real time, as I said before, and every 1 or 2 hours. Well, every time there is an update on the NOAA repository, in 1 or 2 hours, the website WeMAp is updated, and the updated wind field map is shown. We now see the entire path because clearly Fiona has passed months ago, and the wind, while the track the track is shown for the entire track is shown, the wind field map are shown only inside the domain that we saw before. Outside the domain, we are not computing wind field because we are not computing wind field because we are not interested in them, because it's far to any of the CRIF members countries, and we just see the track with no information. And we also can see not only the wind field but also the storm surge induced by the tropical cyclone. When it crossed Guadalupe, it was still a tropical storm, so wind speed was not enough to cause storm surge, while in the following days, on September 20th, it caused the storm surge on Turks and Caicos, for example, and also in Dominican Republic, according to the model. And the storm surge is shown, displayed in the terms of over the entire coastline. There are different stretches of different colors, depending on the range of the depth, the height of the surge that was estimated by the model, so in meters. So we can see areas where it has reached in Turks and Caicos up to 80 centimeters, and areas where it was lower than 20 centimeters, according again to the model. These are model estimates, and these are the data that are used, the parameters that are used to compute the losses, that are then used to trigger the payout of the tropical cyclone policy. And again, if we click on the marker, we see the balloon with the status of the country, and we click on the balloon, we go to the specific page, the same page we saw before, but in a different tab, the tab of tropical cyclone, where we see the policy parameters for the tropical cyclone policy with the attachment point, the exhaustion point, the coverage limit, and the records of the historical events, recent events, so since 2017 or 2018, that hit the country. This is the specific section for Fiona. In this case, also we have 2 charts. On the left, we see the maximum wind speed that the model estimated over at least 1 grid cell of the country. So where Guadalupe, during Fiona, the maximum wind speed estimated by the Sphera model was 104 kilometers per hour. And it was a tropical storm category, as we saw actually in the map. And the right chart, as we saw in XSR, show the final losses value computed by the Sphera model. These include losses due to wind and losses due to storm surge, and show how it relates to the policy parameters. So if it's below or above the attachment point, or below or above the exhaustion point. And we also see the design estimates of the return period of the impact of the event, potential, the payout rate, and other information. Again, these are numbers that are not related to any policy place, are adjusted for the purpose of this of this session. Also, in addition to Fiona, other events hit Guadalupe in the past, for example, Grace in 2021 with lower wind speed, 73 km/h maximum, and losses below the attachment point, so that would not have triggered any payout according to this fake policy condition. And Isaias in 2020, it was tropical depression, and so on. And Maria, that in 2017 hit Guadalupe with a very high wind speed, up to 235 km/h, and causing losses much above the exhaustion point that would have triggered the coverage limit, maximum payment, according again to this fake policy condition. There are no other information on tropical cyclone that I think are worth to mention. I don't know if Gina, you have some question or something that would like to see better.
Not right now, no, but we invite people to ask any questions.
Sure.
Not now, Gabrielle, so you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So again, these are, as I said before, all the data that are used in the modeling that can be visualized, that can also be downloaded again through the this link to download the data. Yeah, there are also some other options where we can show or remove the track. We can see the animation of the track since the beginning up to the end, and we can see it also in real time, anytime during the event. And again, also the exposure map, which is the same because the exposure database used in the tropical cyclone is the same used in XSR, because the exposure does not depend on the peril, on the hazard. It depends. It just represents the distribution of the asset exposed at risk. What is different between clearly the different perils is the vulnerability. So a building is vulnerable in a certain way to wind and in a different way to flood, for example. So the next
there's a question, Gabriele. How many years of data is available in the risk model?
So in the risk model, we use all the historical tracks that are available since it should be around mid 19th century. So we have about we use about 150 years of data. However, we are aware that data up to 1930 are not as much as reliable as the data after that date. So we consider them differently, but we use all the information available since 1850. 1850, yes. This is for our risk analysis for the modeling. Clearly, on WeMAP, we show the data of tropical cyclones since 2017 and Matthew 2016. So there are 2016. There is only Matthew. There are some on 2017, and then the complete list from since 2018.
And just to mention that this is regards to tropical cyclone. For earthquake and for XSR, could you let them know how many years of data we use in the modeling?
Yes, in XSR, as I said before, it depends on the length of the available data set. So in the current version, CMORPH is available since 1998, and also the data that are used to run the weather model are available since 1998. So we use data since that year, so for the last 24, 25 years. And the next update, since we are including IMERG, and IMERG is available since June 2000, we will use data since June 2000, so the last 21, 22 years. And
earthquake?
For earthquake, I don't want to say something that I don't know. It's not my field, so we should need to ask to the earthquake seismic expert of the team.
But I think it's since the 1500s. At least we have
yes,
some data
yes.
going back to the 1500s.
Yes, it's definitely longer than tropical cyclone, but I don't know exactly since when the data have been used for the risk analysis. Since which year?
But definitely in WeMAp, we're only able to show a few
yes,
you know, much shorter period than that.
Yes, actually this gives me the opportunity to go to the third section, which is the earthquake list, the earthquake section, sorry. And we have the list of all the earthquake that are available on WeMap, and they start from these that happened in Nicaragua in the April 24th, 2018. So that is the start date of the available earthquake on the map. So I would go ahead with this with the earthquake section, if that is fine.
Yes, because we want to spend some time on the forecasting. So yeah.
Yes, sure. Actually, this will be. I selected something. Sorry. This will be actually quite quick because the earthquake section is very similar to the tropical cyclone section. The difference is that we have a list of earthquake instead of a list of tropical cyclone. The earthquake are taken from the USGS, and again, this is an automatic procedure. So as soon as USGS provide an update of a past event or a new event, the sphere model download the information, the parameters needed to estimate the PGA, the peak ground acceleration field, and it's uploaded to WeMap, so it's almost real time. The parameters of the earthquake are shown in the dashboard as for tropical cyclone: location, time, the moment tensor 1 and 2, and there is also a link to the original USGS entry for that event. And the same we see here, actually I activated Panama for the reason, we see that must be this one. There has been recently on October 20th an earthquake close to the coast of Panama that has been monitored by the model, and actually losses have been computed. And also an even more recent event should be because this one was. This is the same. There must be another one, probably. Well, I don't remember which one. We will see that shortly. That actually caused the marker of Panama to be blue. That it means that an event happened 10 days ago, an earthquake, and after 10 days we do the final run, which is the one that is used to compute the losses and compute the potential payout. So if we click, well, the layers available then in this case is the PGA, the peak ground acceleration caused by the event. And if we click on the marker and then on the balloon, we see, okay, sorry, I didn't activate the earthquake information, but I will do it very quickly, just 1 second. Apologies for this, because actually, as I said, there are no policy in place for the countries that I'm showing now. So these data for these are sort of fake number are not shown in WeMap unless I activate them, and I did for Guadalupe, but not for Panama, but it will be done very quickly.
While you're doing that, Gabriela, there's a question from Susan use only USGS information, or UE Seismic Research Center and Puerto Rico info? Is that also used?
No, it's officially used only the USGS information in the modeling. Okay, so I activated now the section on earthquake for the last 2 years, so this current year and the last one. This is the event that I was mentioning, actually, that we were looking at, that happened in on October 20th. The model estimated the maximum peak ground acceleration of 0.19 G and losses of $10,000, that is much below the attachment point, and it would not trigger the policy. But these are so information very similar to those that I showed before for tropical cyclone, but clearly related to earthquake. And again, the data, the PGA map can be downloaded by the link download data. In this way, we are downloading the PGA field for this earthquake, and that can be in GeoTIFF, that can be then visualized and used through a GIS tool.
Okay,
So
sorry, Gabrielle. I just want to follow up on that question about USGS. As with all of the CRIF models, we use international sources of data that are A, consistent across the region, B, based on a historical record that is long enough for our models, and C, these sources of data are accepted by CRIF's reinsurers as stable and uniform and internationally accepted. However, we do have relationships with UE Seismic Research Center, and they are a key partner of CRIF, and we are always in discussion with them. Some of their data, we often use to, in a kind of validation exercise, and we are always in discussion with UE Seismic Research Center on ways that CRIF and that institution can work together to improve earthquake monitoring and so on throughout the region. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Gina. Okay, so if there are no questions, I will go to the next section of the real-time forecasting system. Okay, so if we click on the fourth icon of the Spera RTFS, the real-time forecasting system, we access the real-time forecasting system section.
Sorry to interrupt again, and just to remind you
worries.
that policy Gabriela showed you for earthquake for Panama is a fake made-up thing. That's not a real policy. Just to reiterate that.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, so the real-time forecasting system is while the first three that we saw are monitoring tools, monitoring sections, so where we can see what has happened, but after it happened, in all real time for earthquake, with a couple of hours of delay in tropical cyclone, and the latency of 2-3 days in excess rainfall. This section is for forecasting, so to see what will happen in the future when there is a tropical cyclone. So forecasting only for tropical cyclones, so not for rainfall, so for wind and storm surge. As you can see now, at the moment, we are in December 13, so as we expect, there are no tropical cyclones, but we can go through the list of historical tropical cyclones. Maybe we can even select again Fiona, since we have looked at it so far. It takes a bit to load all the data because the database includes all the forecasts that have been made since the beginning of since the tropical cyclone formed. And well, once we select the tropical cyclone, sorry, we see the last location of the tropical cyclone, which was here in the north. However, we can go in the forecast window panel and select a different time of forecast. The last one that we're looking at was on November 24th at 18. The first one that was provided by NOAA was on November 14th at 12. And it was in the Atlantic Ocean. And what we are looking at now is the forecast obtained using the forecast data of the NOAA, so the forecasted track provided by NOAA, the official track, and use that as input to the same SFERA model that is used to assess the losses. So SFERA model, through the forecasted track provided by NOAA, can estimate the wind field, the maximum wind field expected in the next 48 hours. So this means that on September 14th at 12, we had this forecast. According to the track provided by NOAA and the model, the SFERA model, we have forecasted that the maximum wind speed in the next 48 hours would be below 17 meters per second, as you can see from, the maximum was below 32 meters per second, as you can see from the map, from the colors, the legend, and this would have been the path of the tropical cyclone. After 6 hours, any 6 hours, NOAA provide an update on the forecast. The SFERA software automatically download it and provide and compute the expected wind speed, field, storm surge, and the impact. So if we go ahead in time, so this is the forecast of 00 September 15 at 6 at 12, 18, so until we get maybe closer to Guadalupe. This was right before crossing the island, and we can see the forecast, the wind speed forecast in the maximum wind speed in the next 48 hours. But we also can select different layers. So starting from the official forecast of NOAA, the official track, we can also select the storm surge. There was no storm surge forecast at that time, but also the impact map. So we can see, according to this forecast, the level of impact on different areas of the country. Okay, so sorry, I went too far. So for example, this may be interesting information on September 16, 12, so about 12 hours before tropical cyclone formation in terms of wind field and in terms of impact forecasted for the next 48 hours over Guadalupe, but also over the other country, Montserrat and Kitts and Nevis, and so on. We do two different types of forecast. One is a deterministic forecast. This is the one that we just I just showed using the official forecast from NOAA. We also do a probabilistic forecast using different forecasted tracks provided by different meteorological institutes, like the UK Met Office from Canada. So there are several forecasted tracks that we use. And actually, if you select the wind median of the probabilistic forecast, we see all of them. The one in bold is the official track from NOAA, but you can also see the others from the different institute. This is obtained with the H-Wolf, for example. I don't remember now exactly the name of the model. Sorry. We see COTC now for this track. So it depends on the type of the model and the institute that provided them. We run the model with all of these tracks and build a wind field for each of them and combine them in a probabilistic way in order to obtain the median or the expected value of the maximum wind speed according to all these tracks. This is the wind median that we see, and maybe we can go a little bit farther in time when it became a hurricane of higher category. We can see the wind median, all the tracks, the forecasted tracks, the official and all the others. We can see also the probability of having a maximum wind speed greater than 63 kilometers per hour, which is the limit for a tropical storm, or the probability of having Hurricane 1 or greater maximum wind speed, or the probability between 0 and 100, clearly, of having wind speed of a category higher than Hurricane 3, so above 178 kilometers per hour. And also we can have information on the impact forecasted in the next 48 hours. So for example, this is the impact forecasted at 12 of the 19th September for Dominican Republic. Again, is a categorized impact of low, medium, and high that takes into account the location and the vulnerability of the exposed assets. So gives an indication of which are the areas that are more more at risk during the event. For the again, for the following 24 hours. We can see also here information on the area at risk on Turks and Caicos. Also from this section, we can download all the data that we're looking at. So in this case, we are looking at the impact. So if we download this data, we will get the median loss impact value for the tropical cyclone Fiona at that time, forecast time. Like also to mention that we also have a sort of API system that allow the users to download through GET or POST request all this data. There is a document that explain how to make this request on GET or POST, and these allow also to automatically download in real time the latest, the available forecast from the RTFS, but also the other data that we saw before, also for XSR, tropical cyclone, and earthquake. All the data can be downloaded through GET or POST request through the API system. And so the information that provided by the real-time forecasting system are, in my opinion, very useful for different purposes. One is in terms of having an idea of the, having a forecast of the level of the impact that is expected in the next hours. But also not only the impact, but we can also see the hazard data expected in terms of maximum wind speed, the storm surge. So this may very helpful in the case of tropical cyclone approaching the country. Also, this is helpful on CRIF side because since CRIF aims at making payment within 14 days and possibly even earlier, it happened that payments were being made within 10 or 12 days. It's important also for CRIF to know in advance if there is a potential payout that can be triggered by a certain event and for a specific country, so that it can have to make all the procedure for the payment for the claim even faster than as quick as possible. Clearly, we saw Fiona, but we have access to all the same information for all the past events since 2018, starting from Irma and Maria in 2017, sorry, and then from 2019, not 2018, from the hurricane season of 2019, all the tropical cyclone are included in the database.
If I could just interrupt for a second, while Gabrielle is finishing up, we'd like to get a sense from you, especially those of you who are in this sector, meteorologists or disaster risk management. Do you have other disaster or forecasting tools that you use in your work, other software or other systems that you use for hazard event forecasting? If you do, we could invite you to put those in the chat if you have other systems that you use regularly. But just so while Gabrielle is finishing up, I invite you to enter that, provide us that information just out of interest. Thanks. And we have 15 minutes left for the session, so Gabrielle will be guided accordingly.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that we saw most, well, everything. So I think it will be helpful maybe to get some question or provide some answer, or maybe if there are some events that someone from the audience is interested in looking at or having information. Any questions?
And a reminder again, send us an email at pr@crif.org if you'd like to request an account. And an organization can have any number of accounts as requested. So we invite you to do that. And a reminder that this information is routinely provided to CIMH, that it includes this information along with other information from other sources in its Duetra platform, and it provides that information to SEDEMA and national agencies across the region. So any questions or is there a cost? No, there is no cost. Persons can access the system free of cost. And there's a hand from David Lee. David, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation today, the CRIF team, and particularly doing the important work to have the Caribbean, this first response financial tool, I will call it. It is certainly very important in the early days after a catastrophe. So thank you for that, and continue to doing your important work. While I have the floor, it is also Loy and CARICAD, thank you for continuing to put together good webinars for us here in the region. It's been great to see Gina and Liz, although she's been very quiet. Again, it's been too long since we connected. And the question I have for you is, the tool you have put together obviously takes into account very well, it seems, fast-moving catastrophes. So the question I have is CRIF thinking of slower moving catastrophes that are going to be cast upon us by climate change? So for example, droughts, it's forecasted for the region, longer droughts, etc. And coastal losses through sea level rise. Is there any thought being given by CRIF to provide insurance products for these? Thanks very much.
Okay, one of the easy answers is yes, but especially for drought, we are actually working to develop a drought product specifically for agricultural drought. And that's, one of the ones that's further up on the in the pipeline that, that should be available shortly. So we definitely realize that those are threats and perils in the region that need to be addressed. And we're also looking at developing a more holistic agriculture product that looks not only at drought, but also these, fast onset events, including excess rainfall, including tropical cyclones and so on. In terms of sea level rise, I don't think we're planning on a specific product for that, but we do appreciate that sea level rise affects the impacts of tropical cyclones. And so part of that, or some of that, would be incorporated into the tropical cyclone model, and maybe Gabriella can say more about that. But we're looking at a variety of products. I know I went through the initial presentation very quickly, but we're looking at products for specific sectors. We're looking at products for other perils as well, like I said, most notably drought. So it's definitely something on CRIF's radar, and we're continuously looking to improve and increase the number of products that are available to members and potential members, not just current members, including also, and Gabriella can certainly talk to this, a runoff model that would support the excess rainfall model. And maybe, Gabriella, you could take over from here.
Yes, well, you already gave a very comprehensive answer, Gina. So CRIF is planning to develop a runoff model for, because the XSR model now is based only on precipitation and use the precipitation as a proxy for flood, because actually it's not precipitation what causes damages, but it's the water depth inundation, so it's the flood. So it's especially for bigger countries, CRIF is developing this with the development start of this model for runoff model. There is a model for agriculture that takes into account drought that is almost finalized, and the aim is of using this model to provide policies for drought. Regarding sea level rise, I mean, the parametric policy is linked to, parametric policies are linked to events, to specific events. So as Gina said, sea level rise may increase the effect of tropical cyclone. This is something, so climate change is definitely affecting the risk. So we do a risk analysis with 100 years of data in the past, as I said. Clearly, those are not totally representative of what will happen or may happen in the future due to the to climate change. So that is something that is also is not currently taken into account, but we are evaluating a way of including this in the policies. However, I think this climate change is less crucial at the moment because the policy that we use, so the policies are used for the next policy. So it will not, climate change is not really affecting, I mean, the risk in 1 year by 1 year, but it clearly, it's important to have it included to see for the analysis of future behavior of the models or the policies. So that's something that we are studying and we will probably include in the future.
Okay, there's a question from Michelle. Going back to excess rainfall, when is the data updated?
So the data of excess rainfall is updated with about between 2 and 3 days of delay. That depends on the delay of one of the input data to the WRF model, sorry, to the latency, and then the time that is required to run the work model, that is about 5-6 hours. So in total, we have a latency of a couple of hours, a couple of days. So as we saw before, the last simulation is for December 10th UTC. We will get the simulation for December 11th, I think in a couple of hours.
Okay, I see a hand up from Ancilla. This is going to be the last question we're able to take. So, Ancilla, are you able to unmute?
Yes. Sorry for the male voice that you're hearing. I am still in Ancilla's account, so maybe it might be
okay.
Imperative for me to announce my name. So it's Alan Stewart from the Tobago Emergency Management Agency. I'm very impressed with the presentation, the part that I was able to pick up. So commendation again to CRIF. Over the years from 2007 to now, which I understand CRIF was born out of that year, your product continues to be impressive, but it leaves me with a question. And the question I have is based on multiple experiences with the rainfall events and the Caribbean or small island states' ability to take advantage of it. For us here in Trinidad and Tobago, especially Tobago, I am of the opinion that there is a need for small island state principal at a very higher level to understand these facilities that are available and how they can take advantages of it. I am of the opinion, and that's my question, whether or not you think it is possible for CRIF to extend its arms into the executives of government, because at that level where you have ministries, especially those that deals with utilities, who are affected grossly, especially on the onset of ICT products, and how in those sectors, how fragile sometimes these infrastructures are. So they are commonly being affected by these rain events, from landslides, wind events, things like that. But I think that the understanding is not rich enough of these facilities and so how they can capitalize, especially when you look at sometimes the data coming out of these sectors. So is it possible that you can drill a little further to get these government agencies to understand better what is happening inside the country? Because the disaster offices just sometimes is insufficient to do it, because you're depending especially on those dollar reports from the disaster offices. But sometimes those are the complications behind the scenes, reaching into the various ministries and having them act in a timely manner to allow the dollar to be on time, effective, and as widespread as possible. I hope my question wasn't too long-winded. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. And I do want to point out, I think since 2016, CRIF developed a training program specifically for its member governments to address that specific need. We actually did a workshop in Trinidad. This may have been back in 2018. And the point of this training is to involve not just the disaster managers and Met officers, but as you recommend, the members of government from, different ministries, to do with planning, social development, infrastructure, etc. We were actually set to come to Trinidad in March 2019, and the day before we were to arrive for a second set of training, that's when everything, due to COVID, got called off, and we went into this hiatus for a couple of years. But it is something that we intend to start back March 2020, sorry, not 2019. And the purpose of this training, like I mentioned, is to involve persons throughout the government, not just those two ministries. And of course, the challenge is to make sure that the correct or the appropriate representatives of those different ministries and agencies participate in the training. But it's definitely something on CRIF's radar, and that in this country-specific training, we can actually look at your specific country's risk profile, your policy, etc. In addition to that, we do have a course at the University of the West Indies that is also open. We've invited government representatives to participate, and that also provides an opportunity for persons throughout the region in the government service to learn more about what this is. And I see Lois turned her camera on, which means we have 1 minute to go. So I'll leave it at that. And if anyone has any questions, please send us an email at pr@crif.org. And I'll turn it over to you, Lois. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you so much, Gabrielle, Gina, and Elizabeth. You know, really such rich content. And I have put back in the chat the email address if you want to sign up for an account. There it is in the chat. And the recording will be sent to all the registrants as well. And we'll also upload it on our CARICAD YouTube channel as well. So that leaves for me to just end with a couple of announcements. And so the big one is our call is out for our Transformational Leadership Development Program. That will run from February to July 2023. And for 2023, we are reducing the cost of all of our programs. And so this program, the 6-month program, will be $3,500 per participant. And even part of this, part of that program, we're actually going to be delivering in collaboration with CRIF SPC, looking at risk assessment. All right, and so it covers many, many things. It start with you getting an emotional intelligence assessment. You will be exposed to a wide range of transformational leadership development tools. You will also be part of action learning as a part of one of the tools that you'll be using for your development, as well as you'll be assigned your very own executive coach. I'm given quite a number of one-on-one executive coaching sessions to really help you on a very personal level to develop your transformational leadership competencies. So if you want more information, go to our website at caricad.net, or you can email us at info@caricad.net. And so, Raji, I'm going to ask you to place in the chat the link to complete our survey poll. We always like to get your feedback. We always say here that feedback is a gift. So there is that link. And so I invite you to complete that for us. And on behalf of CARICAD and CRIF SPC, we wish you all the best for the season. And we look forward to engaging with you in other ways as we collaborate and continue to learn and to network and to succeed together in 2023. All the very best to you all.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.